Breaking tonight, as diplomatic pressure mounts, U.S. and allied forces are reinforcing positions in the Middle East amid rising regional tensions.
14 missiles. 14 ballistic missiles fired in a single volley across 600 miles of open sky, each one carrying enough explosive force to collapse a reinforced concrete bunker from the inside out. 14 warheads aimed not at empty desert, not at decoy positions, not at abandoned airstrips. Aimed at sleeping soldiers. At 1:47 in the morning, when the human body is at its deepest point of unconsciousness, when reaction time is at its biological worst, when the distance between alive and gone is measured in seconds that nobody has. This is not a story about a war that might happen someday. This is a story about a night that changed the way the Pentagon understood what it was facing, and how close the entire American military posture in the Middle East came to being redefined in under 9 minutes. Before this is over, you are going to learn exactly who gave the order, exactly what was found in the wreckage, and exactly why 3 generals in Washington could not sleep for 11 days straight after the classified damage report landed on their desks. But the missiles were not the weapon. The missiles were the announcement. What came after them is what the Department of Defense still has not fully explained. The temperature at Al Rashid Forward Operating Base had dropped to 41 degrees Fahrenheit by midnight. The kind of desert cold that surprises people who have never stood in it. Dry, sharp, the wind carrying fine grit that coats everything it touches and makes the darkness feel textured, physical, like something pressing against exposed skin. The only sound on the perimeter was the low hum of diesel generators running behind the eastern wall, the same wall that in approximately 107 minutes would no longer exist. Sergeant First Class Diana Voss had been stationed at Al Rashid for 5 months. She ran logistics for a supply coordination unit, one of those invisible roles that keeps fuel moving, keeps ammunition inventoried, keeps a base breathing without anyone ever noticing the lungs. At 1:32 a.m., she was asleep in a hardened shelter 60 yards from the motor pool. Her boots were still on. They were always still on. The first impact hit the northern edge of the runway. Not the sound. That came later, delayed by the speed of the shockwave outrunning the noise itself. What came first was the ground. The ground lurched. Not a tremor. Not a shake. A single, violent upward heave, as if something enormous had punched the earth from beneath. Then the light. White. Not fire orange. Not explosion yellow. White. The kind of light that erases shadow entirely for a fraction of a second and makes the inside of a closed room look like the surface of the sun. Then the sound arrived. Voss was on the floor before she was awake. Training does that. The body remembers before the mind catches up. She was crawling toward the reinforced doorframe when the second impact hit. This one closer. The percussion so heavy it turned the air in her chest into something solid. Base-wide alarms activated 4 seconds after the first detonation. By then, the third missile had already landed. The fourth was 11 seconds behind it. At the Combined Joint Operations Center 40 miles south, radar operators were watching their screens with a kind of paralysis that has no military term. 14 inbound tracks. Ballistic trajectory. Terminal velocity exceeding Mach 8. Time to impact on the remaining 10 warheads, under 3 minutes. There was no interception window, not because the defense systems failed, not because the operators hesitated, because something else had happened first, something that would not be understood for another 72 hours. And when it was finally understood, the investigation that followed would tear through 3 layers of military intelligence and land on a single classified file that was never supposed to exist. Marcus Keenan had spent 13 years inside the Defense Intelligence Agency's Signals Analysis Division. 13 years of intercepted communications, encrypted satellite feeds, and pattern recognition work so painstaking that his colleagues describe his process as architectural. He did not hunt for intelligence, he built it, piece by piece, until the structure revealed its own shape. His supervisors had never once seen him raise his voice during a briefing. His pulse rate during the most critical intercepts rarely exceeded 62 beats per minute. On the night the damage assessment arrived from Al Rashid, his hands were shaking, not from fear, from recognition. The missile trajectories were precise. Not battlefield precise. Engineering precise. Each warhead had struck within a margin of accuracy that the intelligence community had previously assessed as beyond the current capability of the launch platform used. The official assessment from 6 months earlier had listed that missile system's circular error probable at nearly 300 meters. These warheads landed within 9. Keenan pulled the communications intercepts from the 72 hours preceding the strike. What he found was not a buildup. It was not the usual pattern of escalating chatter, repositioned launchers, and political signaling that precedes a conventional military provocation. It was silence. Organized, deliberate, structured silence. The kind of communications blackout that does not happen by accident. It happens when someone with authority orders every node in a network to go dark simultaneously. And the only reason to go dark like that is if you already know exactly what you are about to do and exactly when you are going to do it. The operation had a designation. It was buried inside a single intercepted transmission fragment recovered from a relay station in the Gulf. 4 words in Farsi that translated loosely to "the garden is ready." Keenan cross-referenced those 4 words against 18 months of archived signals intelligence. They had appeared once before, 9 months earlier, in a communication between a military logistics office in Tehran and an unidentified recipient whose signal had been routed through a location that made no strategic sense at all. A location inside a diplomatic compound that was supposed to be dormant. And that compound was not in Iran. It was not in Iraq. It was somewhere that changed the entire geometry of what this strike actually meant. If what you just heard put a weight on your chest, stay exactly where you are. Because the next part of this story is the part that 3 separate intelligence agencies attempted to keep out of the briefing chain entirely. Hit like right now. So this reaches someone tonight who has no idea what is about to be said. Do not leave. The next 90 seconds will restructure everything you think you understand about this attack. At 4:11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 hours after the last warhead detonated at Al-Rashid, the National Military Command Center beneath the Pentagon was operating at a classification level that excluded all but 19 people in the building. The room was cold. It is always cold. The ventilation system runs at a temperature designed to keep cognitive function sharp during sustained crisis operations. 64 degrees, fluorescent light that has no warmth in it, and a silence between spoken words that carries its own particular kind of pressure. General Elaine Coulter, the fictional senior theater commander responsible for all U.S. force posture across the Central Command area of operations, stood at the head of a table that held 7 open laptops, 4 secure phones, and a printed satellite image so large it covered the surface like a tablecloth. The image showed Al-Rashid from 12,000 feet. The base looked like a body after surgery, opened, exposed, its internal structure visible in ways that were never supposed to be seen from above. The northern runway was severed in 3 places. The motor pool was a debris field. 2 hardened aircraft shelters had collapsed inward. The communications tower, the primary relay node for the entire eastern sector, was gone. Not damaged, gone. A concrete stump where a 90-foot structure had been standing 8 hours earlier. And then the casualty report. 7 American service members dead, 34 wounded, 11 of those critical. 7 people who had woken up that morning, or rather had not woken up at all, in a place their families believed was safe because they had been told it was defended. In a room adjacent to the collapsed shelter at Al-Rashid, recovery teams found personal effects that had survived the blast. A paperback novel, spine cracked at page 212. A pair of running shoes with a name written inside the tongue in black marker. A phone screen shattered, still cycling through notifications that would never be read. Nobody photographed those items for the official report. Somebody photographed them anyway. Those photographs have never been released. 7 families received phone calls that morning. 7 doors were knocked on. 7 conversations began with the same 4 words. And none of those conversations have ended yet. Across the theater, the U.S. military response was already in motion. Carrier strike groups repositioned in the Gulf. B-2 Spirit bombers launched from Diego Garcia, refueled in midair, and entered holding patterns over international waters. AWAC surveillance aircraft established a continuous orbital track above the Iraqi-Iranian border. Special Operations Command activated forward staging elements at 3 classified locations. At 6 a.m. local time, Black Hawk helicopters carried the first rapid assessment teams back into Al-Rashid. Their job was not rescue. Rescue was already underway. Their job was forensic. They were there to examine the impact craters, to measure the blast patterns, to recover warhead fragments. What they recovered did not match what was expected. The arrest that would define this operation had not been made yet. That phrase belongs to a different kind of story. This was not a criminal case. This was an act of war. And the fragment analysis that came back from the lab 72 hours later did not suggest an enemy that got lucky. It suggested an enemy that had help. Go back to the beginning of this story. Go back to the number I gave you, the margin of accuracy, 9 meters. Now that you know what the fragment analysis revealed, that number is no longer impressive. It is terrifying, because it means someone provided targeting data that should have been impossible to obtain. Listen to that section again. I will be here when you get back. Special Agent Raymond Harlan had served in the Army's Counterintelligence Division for 21 years. He had built his career on the principle that the American military's greatest vulnerability was never its equipment, never its logistics, never its combat readiness. It was the assumption that everyone inside the perimeter was on the same side. He had spent 2 decades being the person who tested that assumption. And in 21 years, he had never once wanted to be wrong as badly as he wanted to be wrong on this night. What the forensic analysis of the Al-Rashid warhead fragments revealed was a guidance signature. Every precision-guided munition carries within its trajectory a mathematical fingerprint, the specific way it corrects course in its terminal phase, the exact pattern of adjustments it makes in the final seconds before impact. That fingerprint tells analysts not just what the weapon is, but what it was told, what coordinates it was fed, what altitude data it used for terrain matching. The coordinates fed into those 14 warheads were accurate to a degree that required something no satellite photograph and no signals intercept could provide alone. It required ground-level structural data, specific measurements, building dimensions, the exact GPS coordinates of hardened shelters, fuel depots, and, most critically, the communications relay tower. Information that existed in only one place, a classified base infrastructure survey completed 4 months before the strike by a joint engineering assessment team. That survey had been distributed to 11 people. Harlan's team began the trace. Encrypted communications, travel records, financial forensics, access logs for the classified server where the survey was stored. 9 of the 11 people showed clean records. Verified, confirmed, cleared. The 10th had died in an unrelated vehicle accident 3 months prior. The 11th was a man named Colonel Desmond Price. Fictional. A mid-level liaison officer assigned to a joint coordination cell responsible for managing information sharing between U.S. Central Command and coalition partner intelligence services. Price had accessed the infrastructure survey twice. The first access was logged and authorized, part of his routine duties. The second access occurred at 11:47 p.m., 9 days before the strike, from a terminal that was registered to his office but logged into a network partition that his clearance level should not have permitted him to reach. He had not hacked the system. He had used credentials that were not his. Credentials belonging to a senior officer who had been on leave, and whose access had not been deactivated in accordance with standard protocol. A protocol that Price himself had been responsible for enforcing. The investigation moved fast after that. Communications analysis revealed that Price had maintained a secondary encrypted channel using a commercially available messaging application, routed through 3 countries, terminating at a node that intelligence analysts traced to an intermediary with documented connections to the Revolutionary Guard's External Operations Directorate. He had not been recruited in the traditional sense. There was no money trail, no ideological conversion, no blackmail leverage that investigators could identify. What they found instead was something quieter and, in Harlan's assessment, far more dangerous. Price believed he was preventing a larger war. He believed that the information he provided would be used to calibrate a demonstration strike, something loud, something visible, something that would force a diplomatic resolution before full-scale conflict became inevitable. He believed he was saving lives. He was not saving lives. He was selecting targets. And the 7 people who died at Al-Rashid died because a man with a security clearance and a conscience convinced himself that treason was mercy. Harlan sat in the interview room across from Price for 4 hours. When it was over, he walked into the corridor, leaned against the wall, and closed his eyes. He did not say a word for a long time. This was not a system that had been infiltrated by a foreign power. This was a system that had been betrayed by its own conviction that good intentions could justify anything. If you are still listening, you already understand that this stopped being a story about missiles a long time ago. Drop the word "inside" in the comments. Subscribe, because the next story in this series goes somewhere even this one could not reach. Share this with someone who serves. Share this with someone who has family deployed. They deserve to hear what the official version will never say. Now, think about everything you heard in the first half of this story. Every detail about the strike, the precision, the silence before the launch, the impossible accuracy. Go back and listen to the first 8 minutes again, because now you know that the targeting data came from inside the perimeter. Every fact you heard before this moment sounds completely different now. Every single one. The damage at Al-Rashid was not the only damage. Within the same 90-minute window, coordinated strikes hit 2 additional forward operating positions, one in western Iraq, one at a logistics staging area in northeastern Syria. The Syrian location sustained moderate structural damage. The Iraqi position lost its primary fuel storage facility and a drone maintenance hangar. But the pattern was what froze the intelligence community in place. All 3 strikes demonstrated the same impossible accuracy. All 3 targeted infrastructure, not personnel concentrations, not defensive positions, but the specific nodes that would degrade operational capability for weeks. Fuel, communications, maintenance, the circulatory system of a military presence. Analysts at the DIA mapped the strike pattern against the classified infrastructure surveys that had been conducted across all 3 locations. The overlap was near total. Whoever had provided the targeting data had not provided information about one base. They had provided a comprehensive picture of the entire regional architecture. Keenan's team traced the communications chain backward from Price's encrypted channel. What they found was not a single pipeline of leaked intelligence.
It was a network, small, disciplined.
No more than 4 or 5 individuals across 3 different commands, none of whom knew each other by name, none of whom had direct contact with the others, all of whom communicated through the same intermediary chain that terminated at the same revolutionary guard link node. Each one believed they were acting alone. Each one believed their individual contribution was limited and contained. Each one believed they were serving a larger moral purpose that transcended their oath. Together, without ever meeting, without ever coordinating, without ever understanding the full scope of what they were part of, they had provided a foreign military power with a detailed, current, and operationally actionable map of American force infrastructure across an entire theater of operations. On the deepest layer of the encrypted server that Keenan's team eventually cracked, buried beneath months of routine communications, was a single planning document.
Not a strike plan, a sequence.
A phased calendar of escalation, designed not to win a war but to erode the willingness to fight one.
14 missiles this month.
A different target next quarter. A slower, quieter degradation of American presence. Not through overwhelming force but through sustained, precise, psychologically targeted destruction of the infrastructure that makes presence possible.
It was not a battle plan. It was an eviction notice.
Written on a timeline that stretched not months ahead, but years. The architecture of retreat, designed by someone who understood that the most effective weapon against a superpower is not a bigger bomb.
It is patience.
Specialist Tomas Reyes was 23 years old. He had been at Al-Rashid for 11 weeks. He called his mother in San Antonio every Sunday at 4 p.m. her time, without exception, without missing a single week, for the entire duration of his deployment. He told her the food was bad, but the sunsets were beautiful.
He told her he was safe.
He told her the hardened shelters could withstand anything. On the Sunday after the strike, her phone did not ring at 4 p.m. It did not ring at 5. It did not ring at all. 2 men in dress uniforms arrived at her door on Monday morning. She saw them through the window before they knocked. She already knew. She had known since 4:01 p.m. the day before, the exact minute the silence began. Somewhere in a classified facility, Colonel Desmond Price sat in a holding cell and stared at a wall. He did not ask for a lawyer. He did not ask for leniency. He asked a single question, and it was the only thing he said for 3 days.
How many?
When they told him 7, he closed his eyes. And he did not open them again for a very long time. The damage to Al-Rashid was repaired within 6 weeks. The communications tower was rebuilt. The runway was resurfaced. The fuel depot was replaced with a hardened underground system designed to survive a direct hit. But the 7 names on the casualty list were not repaired. The 34 wounded were not rebuilt in 6 weeks. The families who answered their doors to uniformed strangers did not receive infrastructure upgrades. They received folded flags. And the knowledge, the specific, corrosive, permanent knowledge that the people responsible for protecting their children had included, within their ranks, individuals who decided that betrayal was an acceptable instrument of peace. Power does not always arrive on the back of a missile. Sometimes it arrives through a login credential used after midnight, a file accessed 9 days too early, a conscience that mistook catastrophe for strategy, a secure message sent through a commercial app by a man who told himself, every single night, that he was doing the right thing. And by the time the system understands what was done to it from within, the funerals are already over. The investigation is ongoing. The identities of the remaining network members have not all been confirmed. Harlan's team continues to trace the communications chain. New access logs are being reviewed across every command in the theater. And for the first time in a long time, the question being asked inside the Pentagon is not, what is the enemy building? The question is, who inside our own walls is helping them build it?
This story is fictional. The weight of it is not.
The names are invented. The vulnerability is real and documented across decades of counterintelligence case studies. If this reached something inside you, let it reach someone else.
Like this video, leave a comment, subscribe.
Share it with one person tonight who wears the uniform or loves someone who does.
Not for the channel.
For the conversation that needs to happen out loud. Because silence, as this story showed you, is never empty. Silence is where the damage begins. Every name, every official, every event described in this story is entirely fictional, created for dramatic storytelling purposes only. The military branches and agencies referenced are real. The threat of insider compromise within defense and intelligence structures is a documented, real-world concern studied extensively by counterintelligence professionals. The specific story told here, the characters, the events, the strike, the investigation, is not real. It was crafted to illuminate a pattern, not to report a fact.